Americans have a very complex relationship with immigration. You see, most every American recognizes that the United States is a country that was built by immigrants, and immigrants are often upheld as one of the foundations that make this the unique nation that it is today. But some would argue that America is not just a unique nation. America is the greatest nation in the world. Those same immigrants whose stories people have romanticized for the last 150 years or so are often also vilified. It's not uncommon for us to hear that immigrants are lazy, they're dangerous, they're coming to this country to steal jobs from hardworking Americans while dragging down the economy and bringing diseases with them. But such a negative assessment is nothing new, because these are virtually the same things that some Americans have been saying about immigrants and immigration for the last 130 years. When people are speaking about immigration in such a negative and hostile way, there's usually some type of fear that is connected to that hatred. In regards to immigration, I believe that fear stems from this belief that if too many immigrants come to this country, Americans are going to lose their way of life. And that's perfectly understandable. And it's one of the motives or one of the things that drives this English-only mentality and the many references to this being a Christian culture and a Christian nation. But you see, English is the de facto language here, and Christianity is the dominant religion, and that's not going to change at any point in the near future, if ever. So why the extreme fear? I believe the extreme fear is directly connected to people's belief that this is the greatest country in the world. Think about it. How often have you heard that this is the greatest country in the world from somebody that doesn't even own a passport and has never visited another country, not even Canada? Yet the sense remains that everybody around the world wants to come to the greatest country and live here permanently. Last year, I stumbled across some polls from Gallup that caught my attention, and to be honest with you, they kind of shocked me. It seems that Gallup likes to ask people on a yearly basis in 150 different countries if they would relocate permanently from their current country of residence to move elsewhere. Now, I can imagine that it's very difficult to ascertain exactly how many people in war-torn areas want to leave those places, but Gallup is a company that employs a lot of brilliant individuals, so I'm going to assume that their conclusions are fairly accurate. And here's what Gallup found. As recently as 3 years ago, 13% of the world's 7.3 billion residents said that they would make the decision to permanently relocate and live elsewhere. The thing that shocked me was that out of the 650 or so million individuals that would relocate permanently, only about a quarter of them actually listed the United States as their desired destination. Now, I know what you're thinking. 140 million people is a lot of people, and you're absolutely right. But that's not the whole world, as many Americans like to think. And also, it doesn't necessarily mean that all 140 million people would have the means to come to this country. Now, I understand that there's a lot of limitations with these numbers and the conclusions, but for me, they point towards something more significant, and they lead me to ask two questions for myself. The first question is, what would it mean for us as a country to live with this idea? How would our way of thinking and talking about immigration change or differ if we didn't live under the idea that the whole world is clamoring to come and live in the United States? The second question is, how would our politicians and our lawmakers talk differently about immigrants and immigration, especially during a political year? We have an election coming up. If we didn't have this mentality that is based on fear and a lack of education. Now, as it was already stated, this is an issue that is personal to me. At the age of 6, I crossed the border illegally with my family, and I lived in this country illegally until I was 14 years old. Now imagine being that young and going to school every single day, and every single day, no matter what you do and no matter how hard you try to focus on your classes, you have this little thought in the back of your mind, and that thought is my mother going to be home when I get off the bus this afternoon? Because your mother is working illegally in one of the many mushroom plants in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, where they have immigration raids on a regular basis, and people get deported directly from their jobs. Now, also imagine being that young, going to school and learning in American history about all the amazing things that immigrants have brought to this country and all the waves of immigration that they have welcomed, and the Statue of Liberty and the land of the free and this and that. But you leave school and you're constantly being reminded that you're not welcomed here, that you need to go back to your country, and that even when you learn the language, you're still not going to be fully accepted as an American. As you can imagine, that's quite a confusing place to be in when you're that young. You see, my whole life, I grew up listening to people make disparaging comments about immigrants, and oftentimes the nastiest of those comments were directed towards my people, Mexicans. Recently, presidential candidate Donald Trump called us all rapists, thieves, and drug smugglers, and he was cheered by all of his followers. Donald Trump was, again, speaking about Mexican immigrants like myself, but the thing that's most concerning for me is that he was talking about people like my parents, who are two of the most hardworking individuals that I know, and they are two of the most honest people that I've ever had the privilege of interacting with in my life. I can't help but wonder, would Donald Trump supporters continue to cheer him on if they didn't believe that this was the greatest country in the world? Would Donald Trump continue to make those comments if people were more educated about immigration? If as Americans we get this confounding idea out of our heads that this is the greatest country in the world and that everybody wants to come and live here permanently, might we be able to change the way that we think and talk about immigrants moving forward? I want to leave you with one final thought today. Just like Americans love their country, so too do other citizens in other countries around the world, including Mexico. Now, I know that might surprise some of you, but we do love our country. You see, Mexico is an amazingly beautiful place with incredible people living there. We have traditions that date back to the pre-Hispanic era, but you never hear about that in this country. You hear about the drug cartels, you hear about all the murders that are happening, and you hear that Mexico is not safe. But do you know what they hear in Mexico about the United States? You see, in Mexico, they hear about all the mass shootings that are happening in this country. In movie theaters, schools, and even in churches. Gallup has another poll that they do, and this poll measures the happiness in many countries around the world. As recently as 2014, they polled 143 countries, and they assigned each country a positive experience index score. What this score measures is how often people smile, laugh, learn, or do something interesting that brings joy to their life. The highest score any country received was an 89, and the lowest score that any country received was a 47. Mexico's score came in at a 76, and the United States came in at a 79, just 3 points higher than Mexico. Perhaps if the positive experience index score of the United States was significantly higher, then we would see this massive wave of Mexican immigrants rushing to come to the United States and set up permanently. But as it is, not that many do. And relatively speaking to the rest of the world, neither do that many other immigrants around the world. I like to imagine what kind of world we could create if we kept all of this information in the back of our minds moving forward. And I will say this, Mr. Trump is absolutely right about one thing. It is time to make America great. But the only way that we're going to accomplish that is if we change up the lens that we are viewing immigration through. And if we start to embrace the immigrants that are already in this country and the immigrants that will continue to come to this country, and embrace all the diversity and all the different cultures that they bring with them. Thank you very much.